Good morning everybody, welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'm going to be talking about Sirens and Satellites. I have to do both minis and large size bars, but I'm going to do them separately because I have to have the minis done first. I actually have an order in for 9 Sirens and Satellites minis, and I also have to make some for Murder of Crows. I only have to make the large size bars for Murder of Crows, so I have less time for the minis. So I'm going to do the minis first. And the first thing I want to talk about are just a little moment about molds. These are the 2 molds that I use to make the minis for Sirens and Satellites, and these are both exceptional molds. I got both of them on Etsy. If you're curious about which Etsy vendor it was, I'll look it up and I'll tell you, because I totally recommend getting molds from them. These molds are great because they are possible to pour without having an enormous amount of cleanup. In fact, these 4 pieces have had no cleanup at all. They pulled right out of the mold like that. And just a thing about molds, a lot of these molds that you see, especially on Etsy, these little custom molds, are what they call pressure molds. They take a positive, usually it's a piece of jewelry or a charm or some small object, and they have like a sort of a hard, or harder than the goo that I use, silicone, and they press them in and leave an impression and pull them out later to create the mold. But oftentimes, because these are done by hand and they're small objects, the molds aren't really deep enough, and it causes problems. These are excellent molds, and I'll bring this one a little closer to the camera. I'm hoping that the camera will focus on it. These have nice texture in the molds. The starfish has a nice little sand texture. The seahorses have beautiful scale definition. These pull out beautifully clean. They need nothing. And I'm just going to show you, like, just by comparison, this is one of the molds that I use for the Clockwork Heart. And it was done in the exact same way as this. These are pressure molds. But if you look at them, you can see that these are much deeper, that the object was pressed much harder into the mold in order to create a deeper impression. And these are really problematic, because this shallowness is why I have to spend so much time cleaning all the holes out of the gears and cleaning up these holes, because this is so shallow that as soon as I pour them, it all fills. I can see where the empty spaces are supposed to be, but I have to cut them all out by hand. So point is, molds matter, and getting better molds saves you a lot of time over getting ones that have not been prepared quite as well. So these are beautiful. They need absolutely nothing, thank goodness, and they just pull out of the mold like that. These are done with detergent-free soap. The reason why they're done with detergent-free soap is because it's a little bit more flexible than the regular soap when it cures. And when I do the larger size bars, that makes a difference. In these mini bars, it won't matter, but when I do the full size bars, we'll revisit that. In fact, I took the 4 stiffest ones, the ones that were the least flexible, to do for these, but I have very flexible ones for the full size bars because I need the flexibility there. I created 8 of the starfish and 8 of the seahorses. I have already trimmed them all up except for 2, just to show you. I don't have a set color plan for the little starfishes or seahorses. I tend to just pick whatever bright colors I have on hand. In this case, this is what it was, what I had extra of. They're not scented or anything. They're just, they are just, you know, what they are. But I do have 2 last ones that I'm going to trim. And you can see, like, the trimming on these is kind of minimal. They're thin. The flash is easy to remove with a sharp X-Acto knife. They don't take a lot of fighting with. It also helps that I don't have to make any holes. I'm just trimming around what's already needed. Cutting into and cutting things away from the center is always a little harder. But they only take a couple of minutes to clean up. And as I said, there's no particular pattern on what colors I use. I just happen to have these colors available, so these are the colors that I picked today. I'm going to be making 16 of the minis. 9 of them are going to an order. The rest will go to Murder of Crows. And I'm going to be making 4 of the large size bars. But I'll do that after these minis have been poured. Okay, so that's the last starfish, nice and cleaned up. And one last seahorse. Right? This is a nice little tropical ocean green, although we're gonna be painting these, so it won't stay quite this color. But this is a pretty color. Just go real quick around the edges. Okay. And it's just a little in the face. Just clean that up. There we go. Okay. Alrighty. So these are all done now, and then the next step is going to be painting these. All of these pieces need to be painted. These seaweed pieces, although they're seaweed or coral, I mean, you can use them for either, some other underwater thing. I use them as seaweed. All get the same paint job, and the ones for the little tiny pieces I just do relatively randomly, just to make them fun, bright colors. So that's going to be the next step. So as soon as I'm set up for that, I'll be back. Okay, I am back now to go on with the next step in our Sirens and Satellites minis. And as I said, the next step is going to be painting. I have a small little lid here that contains rubbing alcohol, ordinary rubbing alcohol. And these four all get the exact same thing, which is this. It's a color called Evergreen, which should be self-explanatory. I'm just going to dip my little half-inch brush into the mica and the alcohol to create a wash, and then easiest thing in the world, right? I'm just gonna cover this up just like this with this evergreen mica. This is round one, and it'll just do what it does. It's just gonna seep into the deeper areas of the mold, and that's all I need it to do. If it starts losing pigment, just add a little more, and there you go, you got some more pigment back. Now, all I'm trying to do is give these some dimension, and the base of the soap that is used for these is an olive oil and aloe vera base, and it has a natural green tint, and it's slightly foggy. So because of that, we're going to use that to our advantage, because it kind of looks like water anyway. So there's no need to tint it. It just is the color that it is, and it saves a step. But what it also does is obscures some details, and in this case that's to our advantage, because all we really need to do is that, just leave them alone, and on its own this will appear on the finished soap like seaweed, without having to do anything else to it. If we really want to, we can take a tiny bit of paper towel, oops, and just carefully kind of blot it to get kind of an uneven appearance, but you don't even have to do that. You can just leave it alone and not do anything. I kind of like them a little darker, so I'm just gonna make sure that it's all done. Okay, so that's it for these. And the ones on the large bars get the exact same treatment. Nothing is different. Those are the same. But where it's a little different is that each one of these little pieces has to be painted in a color or a variety of colors, depending upon how much time you want to spend on it. And I can't put them all into frame because I've got such a tiny little area I'm working with, but I've brought over a bunch of basically random mica colors to work with, and it's the same procedure. The only difference is that you're going to just do them one at a time, pick whatever colors you want to use for that particular item, and just use alcohol and your brush, and just, paint. You can dry brush, you can wet brush. I find that a combination of both is very nice. This is a color called Banana Boat Yellow that I don't really use for all that much, so I'm going to try it on here. I'm going to see how that looks on the little fin there, and that's pretty. I'm going to just give the little scales a bit of a a highlight in this yellow, take it down the tail, and get the top of the head. And I often find that, realistically speaking, that two colors plus the base for items this small tends to work out really well. So I'm gonna, that's my wet brush color. I'm gonna try a dry brush color. I'm gonna use a gold. How about that? Because that's what I grabbed. So we'll use it. I'm just gonna use just a little bit of gold to dry brush all around the top. And I tend to want a tiny bit of black, because each one of these little guys has an eye, and I like to fill that in with just a little drop of black. This is a black mica. It is not activated charcoal. The problem with using activated charcoal in areas this small is that it will not dissolve properly, and you'll wind up with charcoal dust that when it gets wet it will spread. So when you're using, you need black in a very small area, you're better off using a mica than you are an activated charcoal. So I'm just going to dot the eye. There we go. Give the guy a little life. And I'll show you one for the starfish. All right, I have, how about this? I have this green and a little bit of pearl. I'm gonna rinse my brushes off. So I have some green here. This is like a kind of a light, happy green. I'm gonna, wow, I just sounded like Bob Ross. I'll try it on this orange. Just gonna, and when I do that, because it's such a contrasting color, you can definitely see the texture of the starfish that was embedded in the mold. These were really good molds. And again, if anybody wants to know where I got them, I'll put the information up. Just leave a comment on Patreon or leave it on the YouTube video, and I'll let you know what it was. An Etsy vendor, but they did a great job at getting good texture on these. So that looks good. And how about a little white or a little pearl as a dry brush? Oh, this isn't even pearl, this is snowflake. All right, we're going to give this one a little sparkly finish. Just dry brush it in the center. The alcohol that's already there from the layer previous will adhere it. And that's it. That's all you really have to do. So you just pick out whatever colors you want. Again, they don't have to be incredibly detailed. You don't have to get down real low and do them. You can if you have that kind of time. I definitely don't have that kind of time today. But as long as you have some visual interest going on, they will all be fine. So I'm going to do the rest of these off camera so that we have them all available, and then I'm going to move on to the next step, which is going to be cutting these seaweed pieces into pieces, and then at that point fitting them into the mini mold and test fitting each of these little scenes in a way that looks good. Alright, I have all of the embedded pieces that we're going to need painted now, and the next step is to basically take these and cut them into 4, just so you see what's going on here. These won't fit as they are, and we really don't need that big a piece in a mini anyway. So if I cut them into 4 pieces, I can basically create a vignette within the mini without having to waste a lot of time molding. So pretty simple. Just take a piece and an X-Acto knife, and I'm going to cut it where it makes sense, like this. and then I'm going to cut it again in a way that makes some kind of sense, which means that it shouldn't be straight across, guys. Right? Like that. And that means that if I trim this, which I need to do now to get a bit of a more natural edge to it, like that, and then like this, what I can get out of it is like this. And this one just broke into two, and that's okay. Don't worry about that. I can put one of them in here, and then take the two pieces that broke and do something like this with them. So like that. You get the idea, right? You know, you're basically just cutting these four into smaller pieces so that not only do they fit in the mold, but that you can have an interesting and somewhat different little vignette within each mini. So it doesn't take very long to do this or anything. The only thing is that you have to make sure that you cut it in a way that makes some sort of sense, which means that you don't cut it in a straight line. So this is one piece, and I'm just going to do this for all four of these. The exact same thing, where I'm just going to cut it in four pieces, at least four pieces. Sometimes it breaks, as you saw, in a way that will allow me to use all four pieces to create a mini. And in this case, I'm going to take off the bottom because it won't fit. Still won't fit. So just cut smaller pieces like this, and then, you know, like I said, you can make them whatever size you want as long as they flow along some sort of natural progression, and you can just drop them in later in whatever order you want. But you have to remember that they won't fit height-wise into the mold the way that they are, so you have to cut them into at least four pieces like this. If you cut it with the base intact, you want to round out the base so that it doesn't have that sharp edge. And I'm going to cut this one this way, like that. And so then you'll have a whole pile of these little seaweed pieces in varying shapes and stuff that you can use to create a scene within each individual. So last one. I'm just going to round that out so it doesn't have a sharp edge. So now I have this whole pile of minis, of little miniature pieces of seaweed that I am assured will fit into the mold when we get to that point. So I'm just going to take these gently, pick them up, and I'm going to put them into their own things. They have them on the side. Do a little cleanup here. And the next step is going to be making sure that all of our stuff is ready for pouring. Okay, everybody, back and ready to start pouring. The way that this gets done is in several stages. So the first stage is I've got some ultra clear. Now I know that this is mostly supposed to be an SLS free soap, but the problem is that SLS free clear is not clear. There's no such thing as SLS free ultra clear. It's really, really foggy. And so the only way to get a clear lens, I forgot to do that, it's do that first. The only way to get a really clear lens on the front of these soaps is to do it with regular ultra clear. So I'm going to do these one at a time because I'm trying to avoid a repeat of the last time that I didn't do them one at a time. So now that this is in, it's about a third of the way up, I'm going to add my little seaweed piece and just put it in where I want it, and add my starfish. I'm just gonna spray it with a bit of alcohol to get rid of surface bubbles. And then, before that sets up, I'm going to add a small mica scoop's worth of jojoba beads. And jojoba beads are there for exfoliation. They are just little jojoba oil beads suspended so that they stay in one place. And you just put them, I'm putting them towards the bottom edge of the soap. And they kind of want to stick to the mica scoop, which is why I'm adding multiples, but generally it's just sort of 1 scoop's worth. And that's it. And I'm going to leave those there. That's it. So I'm going to do all of these now in the same basic way, where I'm just going to pour a little bit of ultra clear. I'm going to take my little seaweed piece, put it in. And it doesn't matter if it's on the left side or the right side or whatever, it makes no difference. And I'm going to put my starfish in. And I'm just going to push it down a little just so that I'm sure that they're suspended. Spray it with a little alcohol. And then, again, get a scoopful of jojoba beads and put them kind of on the bottom of the water there. If you want, you can change it up a little bit. You can pour one like that. You can put the jojoba beads in first. Doesn't matter what order it goes in. But the reason why I tend to put them in after, I'll show you why, is because when you put them in first and then put the seaweed in, it moves them around, and so they don't quite stay as on the bottom as they do when you put them in afterwards. So, like, you see they sort of just float and do their own thing. So that's why I tend to put them in after, because they tend to stay closer to the bottom of the edge. But you know what? If that's not the look for you, you can do it a different way. And if the seaweed is floated a little, you can just push it down. I use a chopstick for that to make sure that it stays near the bottom. You don't have a lot of time to do that, so keep the chopstick handy for that purpose. And then you just... jojoba beads come in a bunch of colors. This one just happens to be this color, and it's the only color I have here, but it does come in a variety of colors, so if there's something that you want to use jojoba beads for that you need in a different color, it might come in that color. I've only ever needed it for this, so this is the only color I have. Okay. See, it goes so much better when I do them one at a time. When I try to do them all at once, they set up too fast for me to be able to keep up. Okay, and if that happens, right, so that kind of got away from me. I'm going to do that there, and put that in. And these jojoba beads are tiny, tiny, tiny. They're really sort of like grains of sand, small. And they're there for both exfoliation and for moisturizing. Okay, so here's the thing that happens sometimes. So even though that this ultra clear is not that hot, there's so much painted mica on both of these embedded pieces. You see how it's bleeding into the clear soap right here? There's a line. Now when this comes, there's going to be so much stuff going on behind it, it's not going to matter. But I just want to point out that this is what happens when you have like warm soap and hand-painted mica things. Sometimes it will pull the mica off of the top. Oh, I forgot. I see. Okay. I'm like, where'd that go? Okay. So, I'm going to push this where I want it. Push it down. Push this where I want it. Push it down. Right? And then, very carefully, spray it. And add my beads. So I'm going to finish the rest of these off camera. And, because you get the idea by now. And I'll be back. Alright, now these are all set for the next step. So before I heat this soap up, I want to show you that this is the olive oil and aloe vera base. And you can see that it is not in any way clear. It has a natural yellow-green color that comes from the olive oil. And we're going to use this to our advantage. We don't really need it to be clear. So it's kind of green and a little bit murky, and that's perfectly okay. So I'm going to heat this up, and then we're going to tint it and fragrance it. All right, the soap is melted now, and the first thing I want to do is tint it. And when I say tint it, I really mean that. I don't want to add so much mica that it turns into an opaque color, which is really easy to do by accident. So I'm going to add this tiny amount of this particular blue, and I'm going to add a tiny amount of this other more tropical blue, and I'm going to stir them together and just tint the soap in order to give it sort of an oceany kind of color. Spray a little alcohol to break up surface tension. And just keep stirring it until all of those larger particles are gone. And you can see now that it definitely has like a blue tint to it. A couple of big chunks of mica that didn't break up yet. It's okay, just keep stirring and they will. If you go too far with this, it's all too easy to make the soap opaque. And although that's perfect for some applications, in fact for most applications, in this case you don't want to do that. You want to keep it just translucent. The next thing obviously is to fragrance it. There are 3 oils involved in this particular scent for Sirens and Satellites. And it took quite a bit of time to develop it, to be honest. Fortunately, all of the scents for this come from the same supplier. They don't always, sometimes, often in fact, they come from multiple suppliers, and making sure you have all of them ready at the same time is a little weird, but this is pretty simple comparatively. And I don't really know how to explain the scent of this. There's no note in it that really stands out very strongly. It's mixed, there's so much stuff in it, in these scents, because all of the ones I'm using are really complex, that in the end, it kind of all comes together to create sort of like an oceany fragrance. But most important, stir. Because I will warn you again, sing it with me now. If you don't stir it enough, you'll wind up with oily pits in your soap, and nobody wants that. The key is to hold the oil, the fragrance oil, in suspension. The only way that it stays in suspension is if you break it up enough and mix it for it to do that. So it's really important to get it very thoroughly stirred. Okay. This is still too hot to pour, and this, not quite ready, but almost ready. You want to make sure that you're not going to cause massive amounts of breakthrough, because you don't want it to obscure too much. I'm going to spray this with a little alcohol. I'm going to spray the soap with alcohol, and you have to do that gently because some of those jojoba beads are just sitting on top and you don't want them to fly all over the room. Okay. And using some care, again, go slowly. And I know it's tempting to just pour them, believe me. But you have to go slow because that's the only way you're going to prevent really serious and massive breakthrough issues. So if you go gently. And in this case, it makes a lot of sense to sort of pour it at the top first so it covers those jojoba beads so that they don't float all over the soap, which sometimes they might anyway. Like you can see in that lower corner that they're moving no matter what I do. But, you know, give it a shot. You're going to fill these all up to the top. Alright, the batch that we poured is now ready to be unmolded. These take a little longer to harden up than regular glycerin soap. This is because the low detergent or no detergent, what they replace it with to create bubbles, it just takes a really long time to set up. It's got some weird properties, and so it takes a little bit longer than it would otherwise, which is kind of a pain in the ass when you need to get them done in a hurry, but it's just something you got to deal with. These look beautiful, really lovely. And the good thing is that the ultra clear that I used was not so hot that it melted the mica on the starfish, which is great. Sometimes if it's too hot, it'll pull the mica right off those starfish, but in this case, it worked out pretty well. Okay, so hoping that I see that there's glare. There we go. So you can see they all came out quite nice, and they all look terrific. I do have another batch, obviously, that is mostly it's all the seahorses that have not yet come out, but they need about another hour to set up. But these are totally done, and they have a really nice but strong oceany kind of scent to them. And there will be large bars as well. We're going to do the large bars separately as soon as I'm done with both batches of small bars. So just stay tuned, because as soon as this segment ends, we're going to come back and start on the large bars. The reason why that I am not doing them all at once, as I said, is I need these first. I need the minis because I actually have an order for them that have to go out. The large bars are being done for Murder of Crows. I am now officially out until tomorrow of this olive oil base. I have a new shipment coming in tomorrow, so I can't even make those large bars tonight. So this is going to pick up tomorrow when I can continue with those large bars. But in the meantime, these look really nice, and you can see, like, when I move them back and forth, that the seahorse sparkles nicely. That's true with all of the little starfishes as well. So yeah, great. All right, so be back for the large ones. Drown for me, oh, drown for me.
I'll be your guide across the sea. Oh, drown